What me and Daniel Boardman have been saying over the past 4 years has been proven absolutely correct just by looking through social media. That if you're looking for anti Semitism in Canada, the best way of finding it is going to find a politically left wing movement because anti Semitism in Canada is very mainstream on the political left. As soon as Hamas started murdering women, children, and the elderly in their homes in southern Israel, you immediately had all of these proto-Islamist and left-wing socialist groups coming out of the woodwork to basically promote the Hamas agenda, to pretend that murdering Israeli citizens isn't really that bad if you think about it. Well, Israel has a bigger military, so this is just justified. Oh, there's been 70 years of oppression. Just nonsense, stupid talking points. And this isn't something just on the fringe groups. It's not just within, crazy workers' unions and the Green Party and whatnot. This is mainstream stuff. You're having left-wing mayors like Jody Gondek and Olivia Chow soft pedaling the violence happening in Israel. Olivia Chow finally took her previous statements back, making it seem like, well, I really stand with the people of Palestine as Hamas murders Israelis. Just insane crap, or people looking at body counts to pretend that they can find some moral equivalency in that. I would just like to point out that Nazi Germany took more casualties than Great Britain and the US combined, but that didn't make Germany right in World War II. Just because the Palestinian Authority and Hamas build rocket batteries right on top of schools and hospitals does not mean that Israel is responsible for those deaths. But anyways, the anti-Semitism in Canada is far more widespread mainstream on the left than just these fringe groups. The Honest Report in Canada did a great report that showed this absolute garbage that the CBC had emailed out to their own staff, asking their own people to not actually refer to Hamas as terrorists. This is something that they quoted from the email from a CBC news editor to their writers and anchors. This is one of the quotes. It says, "The Gaza Strip, Gaza, it's okay to use that as a clipped form even if first reference. Please do not describe the 2005 as the end of the occupation, as Israel has maintained control over airspace, the seafront, and virtually movement into and out of the area." Do you know why Israel blockades Gaza? They do it for the same reason Egypt does it, because Gaza is controlled by a terrorist group. And I don't mean this in the sense that there's a lot of terrorists in Gaza, ergo they're controlled. Hamas is the government, and Hamas is a terrorist group. It's a terror state. So Egypt and Israel have both blockaded it because you cannot trust free movement coming in and out of that place to not be basically a big front for terrorists trying to get into Israel. There's a reason why it's blockaded, and it's not because big bad Israel doesn't like the Palestinian people. They literally gave Gaza over to the Palestinian people, and they voted in Hamas. And then right after Hamas was voted in, Hamas banned all future elections. They are on the 18th year of a 4-year term. It's completely ridiculous. But just moving on, there's more stuff in this ridiculous CBC email where they said, do not refer to militant soldiers or anyone else as terrorists. The notion of terrorism remains heavily politicized and is part of the story. Even when quoting/clipping a government or a source referring to fighting as terrorists, we should add context to ensure the audience understands this is an opinion, not fact. That includes statements from the Canadian government and Canadian politicians. That is absolutely brutally disgusting. And the reason why I call this anti-Semitic and why people like my colleague Daniel Boardman call this anti-Semitic is not because if you criticize Israel, it's anti-Semitic. Daniel and I can both make criticism of Israel. We don't like vaccine mandates that happen there. We do not like certain policies the government has. But what makes the current criticism and attacks on Israel anti-Semitic is because the standard that they are applying to Israel, that they are not allowed to fire back at Gaza terrorists when they're literally murdering, raping, and burning down Jewish homes, is insane, because we would never apply that standard to anyone but Israel, or at least the political left never applies it to anybody but Israel. Do we think that we wouldn't we wouldn't fire on some fictional city in Canada if it was had its own government or whatever, and it was firing on other Canadian cities? We would wipe it out. We would probably be far less soft-handed than the Israelis have been dealing with Gaza for the past 13 years. But whatever. This is what we like. Even here, this is one of the most pathetic people Fred Hahn, who is the leader of QP Ontario, has been putting out absolute trash. Again, Fred Hahn, a gay man who would be murdered if he went to Gaza, is putting out stuff like this. Sorry, I'm trying to get it to come up on screen. He says, as we all think about reasons to be thankful this Thanksgiving, I know I am thankful for the power of workers, the power of resistance around the globe, because resistance is fruitful. And no matter what, some might say resistance brings progress, and for that, I'm thankful. That's absolute communist gobbledygook. And he's not referring to some vague form of resistance. He is very heavily implying that he supports the Gaza murder of Jews, because what was going on for the past 2 days is him liking and retweeting posts praising Hamas for breaching the barrier that Israeli puts up around Gaza and going around and murdering Jewish people. And again, when I say it's communist gobbledygook, he doesn't even put a metric on whether or not resistance is good. It's just always good. Communists in India killing people, Khalistani terrorists in India killing people, communists in the Philippines. There actually is still a Filipino insurgency for the communists going on there. All this other killing around the world, as long as you frame it as resistance, that's totally fine. The FLQ in Quebec, they were fantastic because they were resisting. The IRA in Northern Ireland, those people are great because they're resisting. That's complete and utter nonsense. And it's being used as a front to criticize Israel as if somehow Israel is the bad guy because they oppose resistance. Whatever. But he was also liking stuff like this moron saying, I'm not supporting the attacks. Israel has a much greater military might. I am, however, not surprised that this has happened. Blame the Israeli government. Blame the Israeli government because Hamas terrorists walk into a home full with a Jewish family inside, and they torture and rape and shoot all of them. Yeah, that's resistance against a greater military threat. That's what every country does whenever they're trying to resist a greater military threat. They just target children. That's not nonsense. Even now, you have the Hamas militants who kidnapped a bunch of Israeli citizens and brought them back over to the border in Gaza are saying, if Israel fires back on us for killing their people and kidnapping them, we'll start executing all of the hostages on camera, torturing and executing them on camera. Yeah, this sounds like a freedom fighter group, but I guess the CBC thinks so. And it's not just the CBC. Look at any dumb political science academic from a university, any professor, and they are making excuses. They're talking about anything but what is going on in Israel. They just talk about how, I even have professors I had at U of C and MRU soft pedaling what's happening, not really wanting to talk about how horrific the Hamas attack on Israel is. It's always about this moral equivalency that, Israel and Hamas are fighting, so there must be a 50-50 kind of conflict going on here. There's not. Whenever you try and be neutral in a situation like this, all you're doing is elevating the actions of terrorists and pretending they're legitimate and maligning the defensive actions of a state like Israel. You cannot be neutral in a situation like this and just say, we should de-escalate. We should just, everyone should just calm down and have a ceasefire. All you're doing is saying that Hamas gets to have the first strike. They get to kill as many people as possible in 24 hours, and then they can call for a ceasefire and de-escalation, and then that's being morally reasonable in some way. No, a ceasefire would be a mockery of peace right now, but the Canadian left doesn't really care about peace. They're just trying to put up a moral shield for Hamas to keep on living. I think Israel should wipe out Hamas. I do not think that this is a group that you can keep letting exist on your border, not only because it's a threat to Israel, it's a threat to all Muslims in the area as well. The biggest killer of Muslims in Palestine is terrorist groups like Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, and Islamic Jihad, all funded by Iran, by the way. Joe Biden just gave them $6 billion, and less than a month later, we have a bunch of shooting going on in Israel again. That's by terrorist groups that are funded directly by Iran. But we're never going to note this in the Canadian media or on the Canadian left because that's inconvenient. Because not only do they soft pedal the actions of Hamas, they support the regime in Iran. They don't care about trying to list the IRGC as a terrorist group despite shooting down a plane full of Canadians. They don't care about any of this stuff. They don't call out Khalistani terrorists in Canada. The Canadian left is the most anti-Semitic political side of the political aisle in Canada. It is without question. There's a reason why their union members and their activists can show up to pro-Hamas rallies all across Canada, and they're not going to lose their jobs. Nothing's going to happen to them, because as long as they frame everything in the frame of oppressor and oppressed and resistance versus authoritarianism, then they can get away with thinking it's okay to shoot a Jewish child in the head. Anyways, that's it for me today. I have my donation link in the description, my legal fund. I don't really want to talk about it too much today. I'm a little bit mad. Other than that, I'll see you guys next time.